Well, good morning, Highlanders. It's really good to see you here today, and we want to say welcome to everybody watching online as well. And as Mike mentioned to you just a moment ago, we're still in this series, Shades of Grace. Today's kind of the last of the mature subjects, and so we've just been giving that parental warning along the way. And beginning next week, we're still going to be in this series, but we're just going to be talking about matters that are not as mature in subject. And so all ages would be welcome. I think anybody, any age would be fine being in here. We're just going to be talking about things like being single and dating and being married and those kinds of things that would be great for young kids even to hear. But I'm going to wrap up this section of it, this first section of it, the parental warning series. And we're going to talk about pornography today. When I was younger, pornography was a lot harder to get a hold of than it is now. Not impossible at that time, though, because teenage boys can be very resourceful when it comes to finding that. But there were no personal computers at that time, so it had to be paper print. It was almost impossible to buy if you were underage. And so for many young teens, the best that could be done was looking at the bra section of their mom's JCPenney catalog. Sometimes a kid would find his dad's Playboy stash in the attic and then invite his friends over to take a look with him. So my exposure to pornography as a kid was pretty limited. But today, access is easy and plentiful, and it is on video computers instead of paper print. Technology has proliferated nude images. You can look at it on your laptop at work. You can look at it on your phone at school. A guy named Mark Regnerus is a sociologist and professor at the University of Texas, and he reported that in America, 84% of 14 to 18-year-old males have viewed pornography, and 57% of girls that same age. Frankly, those percentages seem low to me. I was talking recently with Kevin McConnell, who many of you know. He's a retired school administrator, and he told me that he was at an administrator's workshop not long ago, and the figure they reported there was that 75% of third graders have viewed pornography. That seems more realistic to me. But what this tells us is that it is now the norm for minors to have watched adults having sex on the computer. According to a website called Covenant Eyes, only 55% of those over the age of 25 believe that viewing pornography is wrong. So almost half the people in America believe that there's nothing wrong with that. And for those between the ages of 13 and 24, they believe that not recycling is more harmful and detrimental than viewing pornography. And that just kind of shows you where we've arrived at our society today. When asked the last time they looked at pornography, 46% of men said it was last week. 25% said yesterday or today. And this isn't just an American thing. Porn websites are among the most visited websites in the world. 1 in 5 internet searches is for pornography. So what we're talking about here is a global phenomenon. And while sexual images have always been of interest, computers have created a major shift in how it is viewed and how often it is viewed. One person said, men today can see more flesh in 5 minutes than their grandpa could see in a lifetime. It has changed that significantly. And this is true for women as well. You look at statistics, pornography viewing is on the rise among women too. So what I want to do this morning is lay out an argument that pornography ruins real sex. Like, we might think that it is harmless, but I want to talk to you about how viewing pornography, especially on a regular basis, diminishes, ruins, takes away what God intended sex to be for us in a marriage relationship. I want to begin in the Old Testament book, Song of Songs. Sometimes it's called Song of Solomon, is how people refer to that. But I want us to see what God intended sex to be. Song of Songs is a collection of poetry or songs that describe a married couple who are deeply in love with intense sexual feelings. It's obvious as you read through it that they are young and newlyweds, that they are hot for each other as you read through this. And they express their physical attraction for each other. And so it's Hebrew poetry. So not only is it poetry, but it's Hebrew. So some of it sounds a little weird to us. But when you understand the metaphors, you understand what it's talking about. And so their story depicts sex in their marriage as fun and exciting and exhilarating and fulfilling, not just for having babies. So, for example, in chapter 2, the husband is likened to a gazelle, and he's leaping home, very excited to see his wife. And his wife says things like, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth," and "Hurry, let the king take me into his chamber." And so what's happening here is that you have this young husband hurrying home from work, and he's like a gazelle. I can't wait to get there. He's speeding along as fast as he can, and his wife is saying, "Hey, king of my house, take me to the bedroom." So this sounds kind of exciting, doesn't it? Like, you kind of want that to happen when you get home from work. Like, that's a good day. Do you remember in the original Top Gun movie where Goose is playing the piano and singing, and his wife is played by Meg Ryan, and so all this is happening, they're there, the singing is going on, they're having a good time, it goes on for, it depicts it like going on for a long time, it's getting late into the evening, and then his wife, Meg Ryan, says to Goose, "Take me to bed or lose me forever." That's just a modern twist on Song of Songs. That's what this husband and wife are talking about here, leaping home like a gazelle, like, "Let the king take me into his chamber." This is what they're talking about together. So in marriage, God intended sex to be fun and exciting and pleasurable. In chapter 4, the husband begins complimenting his wife's body. So he's home, they've gone into the chamber, they're in the bedroom, and he begins seducing her. It's the love talk that begins. And he starts with her eyes, and he begins working his way down her body. So listen to this. This is in chapter 4, verse 1. "How beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. Your eyes behind your veils are doves. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending from the hills of Gilead." Now remember, this is Hebrew poetry, so flock of goats probably isn't going to work for you guys, all right? Your hair looks like goat hair. Not going to work. You might want to go with shimmering silk or something like that. But it's a metaphor. It's saying, just as you would look at a flock of goats on a beautiful hillside and you go, "Oh, look at that picturesque scene." It's like that's the same feeling I get when I look at your eyes and your hair. There's just this one, it looks fantastic. So he's just full of compliments. Verse 2 goes on, working his way down. "Your teeth are like a flock of sheep just shorn, coming up from the washing. Each has its twin. Not one of them is alone." In other words, he's saying that she's not from Kentucky. She has all her teeth. We've got 2 incisors, 2 canines, the molars on each side. They're all there. You're so purty with all them teeth in your head. Verse 3, "Your lips are like a scarlet ribbon. Your mouth is lovely. Your temples behind your veil are like the halves of pomegranate. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built with courses of stone. On it hang 1,000 shields, all of them shields of warriors." Again, this imagery of this is something beautiful that I'm comparing your body to. And so he's at her neck, and then he keeps working his way down. This is in verse 5. "Your breasts are like 2 fawns." Some of you are going to go home and read the Bible today, aren't you? It's like, what does the rest of this say? "Like twin fawns of a gazelle that browse among the lilies. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee, I will go to the mountain of myrrh and the hill of incense." mountain and hill. All right, working his way down. What's he talking about here? You are. That's right. Verse 7. You're thinking, this is the best sermon I've heard in years. You are altogether beautiful, my darling. There is no flaw in you. Come with me from Lebanon, my bride. In verse 12, the husband continues down even further, compares his wife's body to a garden. You are a garden locked up, my sister, my bride. You are a spring enclosed, a sealed fountain. Your plants are an orchard of pomegranates with choice fruits. And then at this point in the song, the wife chimes in, and it becomes a duet. And she sings, let my beloved come into his garden and taste its choice fruits. Oh, yeah. You're thinking, what book of the Bible is that? How do I find that one? What does the rest say? This is a biblical, musical rendition of the beauty and pleasure of sex between a husband and a wife. And this is what God meant it to be for us. Enjoyable, fun, passionate. But notice in this metaphor of a garden that it's talking about his wife's garden being locked up and enclosed and sealed. And the idea here is that the Lord meant sex to be enjoyed within the boundaries, the walls, the protection of marriage. That's what it's talking about when it's saying it's locked up, it's sealed, the fountain is sealed. What he's saying is you don't want to go around exposing your pomegranates and choice fruits to just anybody. You keep that hidden for your spouse. Now, even though since the 1960s, we have been a country of free love, the sexual revolution, our society still has boundaries for sex. And in our culture today, the boundaries that our world sets, so these are the worldly boundaries that we have that our culture has accepted, are age and consent. And the prevailing thought is that if you were over 18 and you consent, anything is fair game. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want, with anybody you want. But our culture says if you're under 18 or if someone doesn't consent, then that is the wall. That is the protection that is there. But the Lord's boundary is different. The Lord's boundary is within the covenant of marriage, and what he tells us is that this is where sex flourishes, when it is protected in that way. And here's where we come back to today's primary topic of pornography. Pornography actually diminishes the experience of sex that God wanted us to have. Pornography ruins that. In Matthew chapter 5, in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, he said to the crowd, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.'" Now they had heard that because that's the seventh of the 10 Commandments. God had established that way back on Mount Sinai with Moses on the mountain when they were escaping Egypt. That was the part of law that God gave at that time. Now, most Americans agree with that. You shall not commit adultery. In fact, research says that 90% of men and 95% of women believe that it is wrong for a married person to have sex with someone who is not their spouse. But Jesus intensified this command in Matthew chapter 5. And he said, "I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." So Jesus said to them that day, "You know that adultery is wrong." But he said, what we need to do is paddle upstream and cut it off at the eyes and the heart. Looking with lust is out of bounds. So Jesus puts up a different boundary than simply the act of adultery. Not to take the fun out of it, but to protect the fun in it, and to protect all that he meant for sex to be. So what I want us to do now is look a little bit at how the lust in our heart that is associated with looking at pornography has a negative impact on real relationships. Neuroscientists tell us that when we experience pleasure of any kind, that our brain releases certain hormones into our bloodstream. It includes dopamine, which is referred to as the feel-good hormone, and oxytocin, which is called the love hormone. And so when we experience pleasure of any kind, these hormones are released into our bloodstream. And so when we experience the pleasure of sex, those hormones are released into our bloodstream. And when that happens, our brain says, "That was awesome. Do that again as often as you can, because I love that." Furthermore, these hormones are what cause our sense of connection and bonding with another person. So when we experience that pleasure with another person, these chemicals, these hormones are released into our body, and it creates a bond between the two of us. So in a marriage relationship, it creates the oneness that the Bible talks about. Man and woman come together. They become one flesh. So when we have sex, we feel bonded and connected and close to that person. Fantastic within a marriage. Interestingly, these are the same hormones that are released when a mother nurses her child that creates the bonding between mother and child. In addition, these hormones actually rewire our brain to think about those experiences more often and to want those experiences more often. And so this is actually how memories are formed. That, I don't know how much you've looked into this kind of a thing before, but a memory is formed. It's a whole lot like a file system in a cabinet. That if you're looking for a very specific document and you have things arranged in your file cabinet, you go to this drawer and you pull out this folder, and within that folder you might have subfolders, and then you've got a very specific paper in there, and you pull that out. Memories are very much the same way in our brain, except they are neurons that fire and link together. And so you actually get this string of neurons that lead to a memory. And so when we are engaging in a pleasurable experience, in this case that we're talking about today, sex, we get these neurons that fire together and form a memory link to get to where we want to be. And the more we think about that or participate in that experience, the stronger that memory path becomes. And so it rewires our brain to think about those thoughts. In our brain, it's kind of like this. Imagine blazing a trail in the woods. The first time you walk that path, you're chopping out limbs, throwing them aside, tromping down the grass. It's hard to get through there. But the more you walk that same path, the more worn it becomes, the easier it is to travel that path, until eventually you've got bare dirt and it's just easy to walk that path. And so we go back to that path then because it's easy and we know it over and over again. And so when we experience pleasure, we are creating that path in our mind. Those hormones are released, those neurons are firing together. Our brain is telling us, do that as often as you can. Within a marriage, that's fantastic. It bonds us together. We form those memories together. But here's the kicker. Watching pornography also releases those same hormones and creates a path not toward our spouse, but toward pornography. And so then our brain says, I want more of that. And that's why pornography is so addictive, because it literally is a drug within our own bodies that we emit within. And we get that high, we get that rush, we want more of that. And pornography creates that within us. And so, it's so pleasurable. Pornography is so pleasurable and the stimulus is so high that your brain becomes overloaded with dopamine, and your brain actually shuts down some of your dopamine receptors, and then you have to have more stimulus in order to get the same effect very much like drugs that people abuse. Whether that be injecting it into a vein or taking a pill, your body gets accustomed to it. And so you have to take more in order to get the same effect. Pornography is the same way. Our brain shuts down those dopamine receptors. Now we need more dopamine. We need more pornography and more extreme forms of pornography in order to get the same feeling that we once had. And again, this is why porn is so addictive. And then remember that bonding thing. These hormones released during sex create a feeling of connection with the other person. But when we're watching pornography, that bonding actually happens with the computer screen instead of another person. And men and women who have watched pornography repeatedly report that they have come to a point where it's difficult to be aroused by a person, but they are turned on by the thought of their computer. Let that sink in for a moment. In an article that I read from a website called Fight the New Drug, pornography being the new drug, it said when someone regularly consumes pornography, they can become accustomed to being aroused by the imagery and endless novelty found in porn. Pretty soon, natural turn-ons and real relationships aren't enough, and many porn consumers find they can't get aroused by anything but porn. 30 years ago, when a man developed erectile dysfunction, it was almost always because he was getting older, usually past 40. And as his body aged, it became more and more difficult to maintain an erection. Chronic erectile dysfunction in anyone under 35 was nearly unheard of. But those were the days before internet porn. These days, online message boards are flooded with complaints from porn consumers in their teens and 20s complaining that they can't maintain an erection. And they want to know what's wrong with their body, but the problem isn't in their penis, it's in their brain. And this is why pornography ruins real sex. In that same article, they used an analogy to describe the allure of the fake images of pornography. They said in the 1950s, two Nobel Prize winning researchers named Timbergen and Magnus played a trick on butterflies. After figuring out which marks on female butterfly wings were most eye-catching to males, the researchers created their own cardboard butterfly models, and they exaggerated the patterns on their wings to make them brighter and flashier than ever found in nature. Essentially, they created the world's first butterfly supermodels, and the male butterflies fell for it. They went straight for the cardboard mock-ups and tried to mate with them. Ignoring the real female butterflies that were right there in plain sight, the males gave all their attention to the exaggerated pictures. And in the article, they said that's what pornography is. It is staged, it is fantasy, and brighter and flashier than anything found in real nature. So in a porn film, a whole team of people make every detail look good. There's lighting and makeup and plastic surgery and implants and liposuction. It takes days to film one 45-minute segment. They edit out all the unflattering angles. They only include the best moments. And they said in this article, it is definitely not like real sex, and you end up with something that's more cardboard than butterfly. But that's what grabs the attention of so many. And again, I say, this is how pornography ruins real sex. We wind up going after what is fake and cardboard instead of what is actually real. And this is why Jesus said, don't look at a woman lustfully. This is why Paul said, flee from all sexual immorality. Not to take the pleasure out of sex. They said that to keep the pleasure in sex. But because it's so arousing, we want more, and we become addicted to the dopamine. So the question then becomes, how do we stop? Because this is an epidemic in our society. Last week's message was prickly because people can get angry about the topic no matter which side they find themselves on. Today's topic is pervasive. That there are so many people in society and so many people in the church who are addicted to pornography. So how do we stop? I'm not going to pretend it's easy because any addiction is hard to break, yet it can be done. For the big picture, I want you to go back for a moment to the analogy that I used of the path in the woods. Our brain forms that path, neurons firing together, they wire together, we form that path toward pornography, we break down, we remember it, we think about it. It's an easy path to travel because we've knocked that path down. If you walk that same path over and over, we easily go to it. But if you quit walking that path, over time, it grows back together and becomes like it was before. It heals. If you quit walking that path in the woods, if you leave it for years, if you don't go back to it, eventually it grows back over, the grass grows up, the weeds grow up, the trees grow up, the limbs fall into it, there's no longer a path there anymore. The same thing happens in our brains. If we quit traveling that path in our mind, if we quit thinking about pornography, if we quit viewing pornography, that path will grow over. But like a woods, it takes time. We can say, I want to form a new, healthier path. Mentally, this is the process of forgetting. Imagine it this way. Let's say that you have a new coworker join your team at work, and you learn her name. And so every day, you have to call up that person's name in your mind. And so all those neurons are firing, and you're forming that path to her name so that when you see her, you can call her by name. And because you're doing it every day, it becomes a well-worn path, and you can call up that name easily. But now imagine that coworker leaves and moves to Utah, and you don't stay in touch, and she's gone for 10 years. You haven't thought about her in 10 years. You haven't called her name up in 10 years. But she comes back to town, and all of a sudden, what are you doing in your mind? What is her name? I can't think of it. And you're trying to blaze that trail again to find her name. That is the process of forgetting. That's what we have to do with pornography. We have to stay away from it for a long time and allow those paths to grow up. But that begs the question, how do we stay away for a long time? Because your phone is right there staring at you. The desire for that dopamine, that pleasure, that feeling, that rush is so strong, and it's so easy. And we can tell ourselves, yes, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to not go back to that path. I'm going to let it grow over. And we start blazing new trails in our minds. And for a day, we're going, yes, chopping away, forming this new path. But then we get tired. And have you ever walked through the woods like that, and you're getting on a new path, and eventually you get tired? Like for a while, you're full of energy, and you're doing it, and then it's like, I'm so tired, I'm just going to go walk that path. Same thing happens with us mentally. We say for a while, I'm going to blaze a new path, but then we get tired, and we go back to the old path, something that's known, something that is routine to us, something that's pleasurable to us, restful for us. So here are a few practical steps that you can take. Again, I'm going to emphasize this is never easy. Overcoming an addiction is never easy. But here are a few steps that you can take. First, you have to be committed to stopping. You have to blaze that new trail, and you have to be committed to it. Even when you're tired, you have to say, I will not go back to that old path. You have to have a lot of want to in order to stick with it. Secondly, you have to get rid of all the porn that you have, whatever form that is in. Whether you have old style print or discs, you have to delete anything that you have saved electronically. You have to remove subscriptions from your computer or your TV. Whatever it is, wherever you access it, you have to get rid of it and make it unaccessible. Third, you have to make it difficult to access new porn. You have to put some kind of a filter on your electronic devices. That's where most porn is consumed these days. It's so easy to get to. And so you have to put a filter on it. And so there are companies that make filters that some of them are free, some of them you pay for, but you have to put that filter on every electronic device that you have so that when you Google, no pornographic material will show itself. And so you've got to give somebody else the password. You can't have it. Even if you have to pay for it, it's worth the price. I Googled best porn blocker, and there were a number of different porn blockers that are available, but the one that's at the top of almost every list I found is one that's called Covenant Eyes. And so in your Engage page, I put some information about Covenant Eyes, their website, where you can go and find information about them. But it is a system that you can put on your electronic devices, and it will protect you from viewing pornographic material. But you might have other ways that you access explicit materials. If you're committed to breaking free, then you've got to do what you need to do. You might need to get rid of your smartphone and only have a flip phone. You might need to get rid of credit cards so that you can't pay for any more access sites. A fourth thing that you can do is prayer. Now, obviously, prayer for God to break you free from this addiction, but more than that. You can use prayer as a way to form new pathways in your mind, to blaze new trails. And so what you do is this. Every time you have a thought toward pornography, instead of traveling down that path, instead you pray for someone else. I would suggest choose a foreign mission that we support as a church. I'll give you one. Michael and Rosalind Trusty. Michael has been here a couple of times before and spoke to us. They're doing a church plant in New Zealand. And every time you have a thought toward pornography, instead of thinking about pornography, instead of accessing pornography, you stop and pray for Michael and Rosalind Trusty and the work that they're doing. And what's happening here is that Satan is going to try to bring your mind back to pornography, but if every time he tries to tempt you toward pornography, you're praying for God's kingdom work to be done in New Zealand, Satan is soon going to figure out that's not working anymore, and he's going to stop tempting you in that area of pornography. Use prayer to form that new pathway. Fifth, and this is the last one, you need an accountability partner. My guess is that if you're addicted to pornography, you've tried to quit on your own before, and it hasn't worked. You need somebody to help you along that path. And this is one of the reasons that Covenant Eyes works so much better than all the other porn blockers. Because not only does it put a filter on pornography that you can access, but you also attach someone else's phone number to your account. And if you look at anything that is pornographic in nature, it sends your accountability partner a message and says, hey, they're looking at something they shouldn't. So you need somebody that you know that you can trust, who will hold you accountable, and they will then contact you and say, hey, I got this message. What's going on? If this is something that you're struggling with, these are things that you can pursue. You might also need counseling. And so I've got a variety of counselors that I can point you to. If you would like some help with that, contact me. I can get you connected to a counselor that can get you moving in some of these directions. If you need to talk to somebody, if you need to call, you can contact me. I'd be happy to speak with you, but I'm eventually, very quickly, going to get you connected to a counselor. This is not something that I can do to help a number of people. It's just, it would be too much for one person to handle. But I can definitely get you pointed in the right direction with the right person. Pray with me. Father, I'm sure there are many listening today who struggle with this. I pray that you would reveal what you intended sex to be: fun, exhilarating, a bonding with our spouse. I pray that you would show them how pornography is ruining real sex for them. And I pray that you would give them a commitment to quit and a friend to walk that journey with them. In Christ's name, amen.